Hey, landlords. We're really excited to share with you a new concept here on the RentPrep for Landlords podcast. We're going to be taking you inside of the courtroom. Not a real one, but an imaginary one. We're calling it RentPrep Court, and we got a host of characters, and we're going to get to them right after this.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Welcome to the RentPrep for Landlords podcast. And now your hosts, Stephen White and Eric Worrell.
This is Edward Cullen. He's a landlord from Kentucky, and he says the defendant was a terrible renter. He's suing for $1,048 in damages that exceeded the security deposit. This is the defendant, Jake Ombry, who lived in one of Edward's rentals in Kentucky, and he claims the rental was clean when he finished his lease. He says his landlord is trying to extort money from his security deposit. He says he's always paid on time and that Edward just wants money because he's a slumlord.
Will all parties please raise their right hand?
What you're about to hear is only real in your imagination. The judgments are fictitious, but real-life lessons are waiting around the bend. Welcome to RentPrep Court.
All rise for the Honorable Judge Rudy Fortune.
Edward Cullen. You are suing your former tenant, Jake Ombry, for damages of $1,048. This exceeded the security deposit. You claim Mr. Ombry damaged several walls, leaving large holes and debris on the floor. Tell me what happened here.
Your Honor, Jake was a good tenant. I didn't have no problems with him for 2 years. He started seeing this woman who the neighbors said was loud and causing a ruckus at night. I got tired of hearing the complaints, so I decided not to renew his lease when it was up.
Well, please tell me, when was the lease set to expire?
The lease expired October 31st, 2017, sir. Yeah, and he didn't give me nothing for a notice, Your Honor. He's a slumlord just trying to pull the rug out from underneath me.
Simmer down, sir. Let me get the facts aligned and ready before we start a ruckus here. Mr. Cullen, can you please present the aforementioned lease along with the photos of the rental at move in and move out, please?
Sure thing. Here they are, sir. Well, I see here your tenant was on a year lease that ended in October. In the state of Kentucky, there is no statute for notifying the tenant to terminate the lease. It simply ends on the fixed lease date. So, Mr. Ombry, you may not like that your landlord did not notify you, but he wasn't in the wrong because he wasn't required to do so by law. If you were on a month-to-month lease, he would have been required to give you 30 days' notice in the state of Kentucky. It doesn't mean he's still not a slumlord, Your Honor. If you call that man a slumlord one more time, I'll have to throw you out of this court, Mr. Ombry. Sorry, Your Honor.
Now, Mr. Cullen, I see your lease and see the photos of the damages, but I don't see what these walls look like beforehand. Do you have photos from before the tenant moved in?
No, Your Honor.
Really? I'm not surprised. You know, this reminds me of a time when I was a young boy. You see, we didn't have much money, so for my birthday, my mother, she would get me a box of chalk, and I would go down to this little grocery store parking lot and sit underneath the hot sun and draw for hours. I drew so much, my friends started calling me Chalky, and the name just kind of stuck. One day I was at school and someone wrote a nasty word on the chalkboard, and the teacher was upset and blamed little old Chalky. I was devastated when I was punished, and they told my mother because I was innocent. We lived a few blocks from school, and my mother would walk me there every morning. It was an old, dusty dirt road. I remember it was fall, and the tree leaves were whistling, and my mother could tell this was trouble was eating me up. I told her it wasn't me that done it. I'll never forget when she believed me, but told me that the proof was in the pudding. I didn't have no pudding to show for. I couldn't prove I wasn't the boy that wrote that nasty word. You see, Mr. Cullen, you come into my court today and told me what your tenant done wrong, and you even had pictures to show me. But the proof isn't these pictures, no, sir. The pudding is the original photos from when your tenant moved in. Unless you have photos from move-in day, you have no pudding and no proof that Mr. Ombrai or his girlfriend did this damage. Furthermore, I must ask, I see on the lease you charged a $1,000 security deposit, and you're suing for an additional $1,048 because the quotes for repair came to $2,048. Is that correct, Mr. Cullen?
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, did you keep those security deposit funds in a separate account and notify the tenant, Mr. Ombrai, of the location of that account?
No, Your Honor.
I'm sorry to see that according to the Kentucky law, you must keep security deposit funds in a separate account. You must also notify your tenant of where those funds are located. You come to my court with no pudding, and now I found you haven't followed proper procedures with the security deposit. My verdict in this case is for the defendant. You shall not collect the $1,048 above the security deposit, and you will return the $1,000 security deposit as well.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Well, the Honorable Judge Rudy Fortune favored with the tenant. What do you guys think about this over at the RentPrep offices?
That voiceover work, yeah.
I love it.
Offices.
If it doesn't work out for you here at RentPrep, Eric, you have a lucrative future in voiceover work for sure.
I don't know about the word lucrative, but maybe a future. You know, you could be homeless and have a future still. So
It's true. You got the golden voice.
yeah. So, Steve, listening to this, what jumps out to you as part of the takeaways of this episode?
This is like a story I've heard so many different times, different details. Landlords that go into a situation where, by all means, they might be right. That tenant may have kicked holes and punched holes in the wall, and that landlord may have, in theory, had every right to not only keep the deposit but charge the additional money for damages. And I hate to even say loophole. There was sort of a loophole situation in this case, but it was really a lack of attention to detail that it comes down to, right? So the landlord didn't properly handle the security deposit. That we've seen time and time again with landlords.
Yeah, and that's actually a real law in Kentucky. It's one of the probably the strictest laws for security deposits. But if you do not put it in a separate account and show the tenant, your new tenant, what account that is, I think you have to give them the account number possibly in the location, you do not get to keep that security deposit. Of course, if it doesn't go to court and you keep a few dollars from the security deposit for this or that, you can keep it. But if it goes to court, you can get all of that money, all the security deposit, even if they use every last dollar of it on repairs, is just going right back to the tenant because you didn't put it in a separate account.
Yeah, and I can definitely see in a court situation where, those details matter. That landlord's not going to keep that security deposit if you didn't do the right thing. And not only didn't do the right thing, but on top of it, if you don't document every step of the way, you can't go into court and just say that you did something. You got to have proof. And that brings us to the pictures, right? Mm-hmm. Great point. I mean, you can take all the pictures you want. It doesn't show or prove anything. You have to have that before and after picture. So when's the best time to take a before picture?
The day before they move in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've talked about this topic quite a bit with a couple of different people. Andrew Schultz, who's a property manager, Don Krupins, who's an attorney out in California. And some of the things I've learned from them, I know with Andrew's process is he takes those pictures the day before they move in, and then he emails those pictures to the tenant, and he timestamps them as well with his app on his phone. And then he actually gives them an opportunity 7 days after they move in to reach back out to him and say, you didn't notice this, or we missed this, or maybe there was damage that was done at move-in. But he just kind of, as a nice touch, he lets the tenant point out anything they may have missed in the move-in inspection. He does like over 100 photos, which sounds like a lot. Yeah. And a cool tip that I picked up from Don is he said that he always encourages everybody to email those photos to the tenant and have them reply. Tell them, hey, please, confirm that you've received these.
For obvious reasons, right?
Yeah, because he said even a timestamp can be doctored. He's like, almost all evidence can be doctored. But if you have email correspondence with that tenant and they say, yes, I received these, and then you open those images and those are the images showing those walls with no holes in them, and now you have pictures showing holes in those walls, it's easier for a judge in this situation to say, hey, you know what, this makes sense. I got enough proof here to side with the landlord.
I think there's a psychological factor there too, right? It holds that person accountable. They know you're doing your job. You're documenting everything. You got your stuff together. If they do have a hole in the wall or something, there's no getting out of it.
Yeah, and that's a tip that we've heard for eviction court, and I'm sure it would hold up in this type of court setting for a security deposit, is bring like a binder that has everything neatly organized in it. So you have your lease, you have the before and after photos, you have everything cleanly laid out so that the judge would be able to just take a look at it and very quickly surmise, like, yes, this is true. I believe this person. I mean, it might still have a little bit of time, determining everything, but you don't want to make them have to work for it or her to work for it. So,
right. And I know some landlords might be thinking, man, this is a lot to remember, right? As a landlord, you got a lot of different things. And I agree, there are a lot of little details to remember, but in a lot of ways, it's a mind shift, right? If you just start thinking in that way, covering yourself, always, documenting everything. I think this can be an effortless process for you. Effortless in the sense that you're not straining and struggling to make sure that you're doing all these right things. Take somebody like Andrew, like you mentioned, who it just becomes a process. That's the routine now.
Well, we were actually talking earlier in your office because we're recording this in my office right now. But what we were talking about is the landlord-tenant screening process and the process of placing a new tenant. It's kind of like the story of the tortoise and the hare. So there's two types of landlords. There's the one landlord who wants to get somebody in that unit as quickly as possible, and they cut corners. So they're maybe more like the hare, and they're rushing through it. And the tortoise, it might take longer, but in the end, they finish first. And this would be a great example of that if they are doing the right process. And if both the tortoise and the hare were to end up in court, who's going to win?
Right. Yeah, and there's so many things that fall into that tortoise category, right? Like the verbal lease agreement, or the
hare category, right?
Or I'm sorry, you're right. The hare category, exactly.
Let's see how far we can stretch this analogy.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, it's a great point. A lot of mistakes get made in haste when you're just trying to get somebody in for the sake of filling that vacancy. And something we tell landlords all the time, it is well worth an extra month of vacancy to avoid an eviction on the back end. Mm-hmm. So do your due diligence ahead of time. Make sure you're doing everything the right way. You won't regret it in the long run.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, what we're going to try to do is there might be a few different sayings in each episode that comes from Judge Rudy Fortune. And in this one, he was talking about the proof is in the pudding. So what that is it's a new twist on a very old proverb. The original version is the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And what it was meant is that you had to try out the food in order to know whether it was good. So I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of just go through some different sayings in here and just kind of add something new to every episode. So going forward, not sure how often we're going to do these type of episodes. So if you guys do like them, reach out to us and let us know. You can email me at eric@rentprep.com. You can let us know in the Facebook group. And if you haven't heard our podcast before, maybe this is the first time you've heard us, take a moment to subscribe. However you're listening to our podcast, you can subscribe and get more episodes in the future. And we look forward to kind of coming up with more creative content and going back to RentPrep Court in the future. You got anything else, Steve, before we take off here?
No, I love the episode. I think there was tons of great nuggets of information in there for landlords to pull out.
Yeah, and if you think you've got some pretty interesting stories, something from court, a weird nuance that maybe is only applicable in your state, what we're going to do is we're going to jump around from state to state, and the Judge Rudy Fortune will be following us, but we'll go around to different states and check out different laws and different scenarios. So
yeah, and a great reminder, check your security deposit laws in your state.
Yeah. If you're still listening at this point, you can go and check out this episode. There are show notes on the website at rentprep.com. We actually have a blog post on security deposits, and you can find out if your state has any specific rules. And I've actually got a video that I'll embed too that shows you exactly an easy situation or an easy way that you can make sure that you're following the rules of your state. So you'll definitely want to check that out. The last thing I'll throw in here is I just want to throw a little shout out, a special thank you to Luca, who helps us with our editing of these podcasts. Really appreciate it. Put a lot of work and effort into this, so just really appreciate all your hard work, Luca. Appreciate it.